Also this morning, Nigel Farage says Coutts has more questions to answer after apologising for closing his account. And day two of the 48-hour strike by NHS consultants across England, which is causing large-scale disruption to patient care. Hello there, good morning and welcome to the early rundown, which will be dominated by the results of the triple by-election. And the Prime Minister has been spared 3 losses in one night. Rishi Sunak's Conservatives have narrowly beaten Labour to hold on to the constituency of Uxbridge and West Ruislip, which was Boris Johnson's old seat. But there's still pressure on the Prime Minister, with a big swing to Labour, seeing Sir Keir Starmer's party taking the Conservative seat of Selby and Ainsty in North Yorkshire. And the Liberal Democrats have also inflicted a thumping defeat on the Conservatives in the constituency of Somerset and Frome. Well, let's take you through the results then, shall we, of all 3 by-elections. Here's what the winning Labour candidate Keir Mather did in Selby and Ainsty: 16,456 votes. Claire Holmes for the Conservatives, some way behind on 12,295. It was a historic victory for Labour. Here is what the winning candidate had to say.
Over the past few months, speaking to hundreds of people on the doorstep, I've encountered so much hardship. Hardship made worse by 13 years of negligence and complacency from the Conservatives. Today, that changes. The people of Selby and Ainsty have made it clear. They deserve public services that work and a thriving local economy. They deserve urgent support in the cost of living crisis, flood defences to protect our communities, and an NHS that's fit for the future. Public transport that connects us, more police on our streets, and action to protect our beautiful countryside and rivers. That's what we want, and that's why I'm here.
Well, the Lib Dems called it before midnight in Somerset and Frome, and they were right to do so. A thumping win for Sarah Dyke of the Lib Dems in that constituency. 21,187 votes, overturning the seat from the Conservatives, who got 10,179. This is what the victorious candidate, Lib Dem Sarah Dyke, had to say.
Like so many places across the country, we have been let down and taken for granted for far too long by a tired and out-of-touch Conservative government. While families struggle to put food on the table or pay their mortgage or simply see their GP, this government is too busy being a circus of chaos. Well, the people of Somerset and Frome have said it loud and clear tonight: enough is enough.
Well, Labour failed to secure victory in Boris Johnson's old seat, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Conservative Steve Tuckwell held on with a majority of just 495, down from the 7,210 Boris Johnson secured back in 2019. Those are the results. Only a few hundred votes in it. Let's hear from the winner, Steve Tuckwell.
This message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election in his... And we know that it was his damaging and costly ULEZ policy that lost them this election. I'm humbled and proud to be elected as the MP for the area in which I was born, raised and built a family in, and to represent my home is a huge honour.
Let's bring in Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. He's been with me all through the early hours, watching these results as they've been coming in. 2 thumping defeats then for the Conservatives, but there had been a fear amongst the party that they could have a 3-0 drubbing. He'd be the first Prime Minister since 1968, I think it would have been, to lose 3 by-elections on the same day, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, the British public often throw up a surprise, and the series of by-elections that we've been covering overnight, perhaps not entirely the way that some had predicted. And yes, the Labour Party won one and failed to gain one in Uxbridge. Boris Johnson's old seat stays in the hands of the Tory party by a very narrow margin, but a thumping defeat down in the southwest for the Tories up against the Liberal Democrats, and a record-breaking defeat for the Conservative Party up in Selby and Ainsty, where the Labour Party smashed records and took that. Now, I think there is one big picture lesson to learn. When you look at the pattern of voting and the way that votes are changing in all three seats, what's going on across all three by-elections that we've been covering all night is the votes are moving away from the Conservative Party and in two cases to the Labour Party and the third to the Liberal Democrats. And these swings, as they're known, are quite substantial. And in every single case, they are big enough to see the Conservative Party being ousted from power at the next general election. They are all big enough to see broadly speaking, Labour potentially, if the whole of the country follows that pattern, becoming the largest party in a hung parliament. The result in Selby would point to there being, really quite a landslide victory for Keir Starmer. So I think there is, yes, some crumbs of comfort for the Conservative Party today because they didn't lose all three. But when you look at the pattern of voting, there is very little, I think, there to give the Conservative Party too much to cling on to.
OK, thank you for the moment, Sam. Well, our political correspondents have been at all three of the constituencies. First of all, let's go to Liz Bates in Selby in North Yorkshire. And Liz, that was quite an incredible result, wasn't it? Labour smashing the Conservatives' majority.
It really was an incredible result here. We're still here in a car park outside the Selby Leisure Centre. The sun is rising. The last people are leaving this building. What took place in this building tonight, though, was really momentous for the Labour Party. They needed an 18% swing. In the end, they got 23.7. It was a 4,000 Labour majority in the end. Now, during the last few hours, even the most positive Labour activists and the most negative Conservatives that I spoke to weren't predicting a result of that magnitude. And so what we see tonight is a new, for the first time ever, Labour MP in this constituency, Keir Mather. He is very young, he's 25. He will be the baby of the House. He made a speech talking about what an honour it is, how much he understands the importance of what has happened here tonight. The Conservatives, as you will see on this programme and many others as well, trying to play this down and calling it midterm blues, but it really does feel, because of the size of this result, much, much more than that. They overturned a 20,000 majority. It's the first time the Labour Party has ever done that in a by-election. So in the aftermath of what's happened here, I think Labour will be feeling really that they can start to believe, when they look at the national polls, that those good polling figures can actually be converted into votes. There has been some doubt about that. I think they will start to feel like they can start believing that they can take a majority in a general election just purely because of the size of this result. And Conservatives, as I say, they will be towing the party line this evening and saying that this isn't as big of a disaster as it may seem to be on the surface. But I think privately there will be a lot of soul-searching about this result. And not least because this constituency has lots of different voters, traditional Tory voters, but also some of those 2019 voters that came to the party because of Brexit and Boris Johnson. And I think they'll really be thinking, where do we go from here? How do we start to rebuild? Questions for them over the coming weeks and months. Here, though, in Selby, I think what we expect to see in the next few hours is the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, coming to this constituency. It really was a victory here, maybe in spite of his unpopularity on the doorstep, rather than because of him, but he will certainly still come here and do a victory lap. A win is a win. He'll be celebrating it, and as soon as he gets here, we'll be covering it.
OK, Liz, thank you very much. Liz in Selby, North Yorkshire there, and our political correspondent, Amanda Acas. Let's go to her next. She's in Shepton Mallet in the constituency of Somerset and Frome in Somerset, and another big majority overturned there, this time by the Lib Dems.
Yes, well, here the Liberal Democrats were so confident of winning in Somerset and Frome that they actually declared victory long before all of the ballot boxes even been delivered here at the hall to be counted. And it was because their observers, just by looking at the papers as they came in to be verified, could see that they'd overturned that Tory majority of 19,000 votes long before any votes were even counted. But in the end, of course, Sarah Dyke, a local councillor, and a woman whose family has farmed here in this rural constituency for generations, did win. She's now the new Liberal Democrat MP, elected with a majority of more than 11,000 and a whopping swing of 29%. Activists here ecstatic, greeting her like a returning hero when she came into the counting hall in time for the declaration. And in her speech, it was quite emotional. She said she'd given everything to this campaign. She thanked people for putting their trust in her and lending her their votes, particularly Tory voters, she said, who decided to vote Liberal Democrat for the first time. She said the Liberal Democrats are back here in the West Country, and said people were fed up with a tired and worn-out Conservative government. Now, it has to be said that the circumstances of this by-election are quite particular. The incumbent Tory MP previously, David Warburton, resigned last month in a cloud of scandal. He'd admitted taking cocaine and was accused of sexual harassment, which he denied. So clearly they were always quite confident of taking this seat, particularly as before he won it in 2015. It had been a Liberal Democrat seat for the previous 18 years. And in recent council elections last year, they'd also performed pretty well. Now, local Tory campaigners insist this isn't a reflection of the national situation. It was about these local issues. They say Tory voters told them they were grumpy and fed up and let down by Mr Warburton's actions. But the Liberal Democrats clearly are hailing this as the fourth by-election that their party has managed to win since the last general election in 2019. They believe that this is a sign that they are making a comeback, recovering their lost strongholds here in the southwest. I spoke to the Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine, who said Tory MPs across the country are going to be looking at this and they're going to be scared of the Liberal Democrats again. So the party clearly really ecstatic about this win. We're expecting Sir Ed Davey down here later on this morning to celebrate. He tweeted earlier he's going to need a bigger tractor, and given the party's track record of pulling some interesting stunts to celebrate their by-election wins, we're expecting something interesting.
OK, we'll see what he's got in store. Amanda, thank you very much. Well, Rishi Sunak was spared a by-election whitewash. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Ruislip, Boris Johnson's former constituency, of course, where the Conservatives, John, are celebrating a narrow win.
And Labour are beginning their inquest already. There's fury amongst many Labour people that the ULEZ policy of charging drivers of older diesel vehicles, cars and vans, £12.50 a day has cost them the election. Steve Reid, the Shadow Justice Secretary who was here this evening and was running the Labour campaign, has given his response to this defeat here. Has to be said, a shock defeat, because Labour were confident some time ago they were going to win here. And Mr Reid has said after that result, I think the winning Conservative candidate just said it, didn't he? He said if it wasn't for ULEZ, he believes Labour would have won this by-election. Mr Reid said clearly it did resonate with a lot of people. They didn't like the fact that ULEZ was going to cost people more to drive around at a time when there's a cost of living crisis going on. That's exactly what Danny Beales was saying all the way through the campaign. And then Mr Reid said this: but I think when the voters speak, any party that seeks to govern has to listen. So that's what Labour will be doing after this. So he's promising that Labour's going to listen. Now, just on Mr Beales, the Labour candidate, he did actually perform a U-turn on ULEZ midway through the campaign. It was actually a hustings held in the constituency, chaired by Sky News political correspondent Rob Powell. when after previously supporting the Mayor's ULEZ policy, bitterly controversial policy to charge drivers more, drivers of older cars, he said, well, actually, the time's not right because of the congestion charge, because of the cost of living crisis, and that there needs to be a better scrappage scheme and more help for people. So when we got the results here on the platform that's actually... The platform's still there, but all the banners that describe where we are have gone. Mr. Steve Tuckwell, the winning candidate, I mean, his whole speech was just a complete attack on the ULEZ policy of Sadiq Khan. Now, when I spoke to the neighbouring MP here, David Simmons, he's the MP for Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner, he said that this result is going to resonate all over the London suburbs. Now, what he claims is that there are Labour MPs in the suburbs of London who will be worried about their seats, and it's good news for those Tories in a lot of the marginal seats in the London suburbs who had feared a Labour defeat, a defeat by Labour at the next general election. So this result has had big implications for politics in London. It comes as the Tories have just announced their candidate to take on Sadiq Khan next year. That's the relatively unknown Susan Hall. What if Jeremy Corbyn were to stand as an independent, as he's been suggesting? Does that make Mr. Khan more vulnerable? And then those suburban seats in the general election. We had a night of real tension and drama here. Throughout the evening, Labour sources were saying it was going to be tight, it was going to be close. And then about 2 a.m. we learned there was a recount, but it was always clear that ULEZ was the decisive factor here. When I arrived here before voting closed at 10 o'clock, I spoke to a senior local government official with no political axe to grind. I said, how do you think it's gone? And he said, well, in the early days of this campaign, Labour initially thought they were going to win here comfortably, but they massively underestimated the impact of the ULEZ policy. And that's what's done for Labour here. So, big implications of this result for Labour. Good news for Tories in the suburbs, bad news for Labour. And Steve Reid has tonight announced that Labour's going to listen. Will Sir Keir Starmer now say to Sadiq Khan, you've got to drop this policy, it's killing us in the London suburbs?
OK, John. John Craig, the last man standing. Even the banners have gone, but John is still there. Well done. Thank you very much. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, and our election analyst, Dr Hannah Bunting, are with me here in the studio. Sam, talk us through the numbers.
This is the point in the morning where actually we've had a little bit of time to have a look at some of the results, and a really interesting picture starts to emerge. If I just take you here, this is all the by-elections where Labour and the Conservatives have been fighting it out in this Parliament. It's in sort of time order, so the two at the bottom are the ones that we're talking about today. And you can see both disappointment with the Uxbridge and South Ruislip result. That resulted in a 6.7% swing from the Conservative Party to Labour. That wasn't enough. They needed 7.5% in order to win. They didn't get it, and therefore that seat stays in Conservative hands. But look at that, the biggest swing in this Parliament from the Tories to the Labour Party, Selby and Ainsty. So that then goes Conservative. That goes to the Labour Party, breaking records that we haven't seen since the Second World War. This is overturning the previously held record in 1990. Now, that is the Labour Party, Keir Starmer's Labour Party has taken the mantle of being able to overturn the biggest Conservative majority in a by-election. So you can see the different results there. And you can see where Selby and Ainsty features on the worst Conservative defeats since 1945. It's the second biggest, in the worst defeat in 29 years there, you can see. So it's the second highest that we've seen since the Second World War, since basically modern records began. Now over to the Somerset and Frome by-election. You can see that at the bottom here. That's kind of roughly on a par with the other by-elections which the Liberal Democrats have won in this Parliament. So again, I think you can see quite a clear pattern the Liberal Democrats doing well. What's important to say, I think, is that across all of the different results that you get in this Parliament, those swings would be enough really to get the Conservatives out of number 10 after a general election. It only takes a swing from the Conservatives to Labour of 3.2% to oust Rishi Sunak after the next election. It takes 7% for Labour to become the largest party, a swing of 12% to be for Labour to get an overall majority. So you can see how the various swings of the Labour-Tory seats break down after tonight. I think that although the Conservative Party did not walk away tonight having lost all 3 seats, the direction of travel across all 3 seats, all in favour of the party opposing the Conservatives, is clear. And so there is plenty, I think, for number 10 to worry about.
It's so interesting, that result. Even though they lost in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, the swing is such that if it was reflected into a general election, it would kick the Conservatives out of power.
Absolutely. 6.7% was the swing in Uxbridge. Just shy of the amount that Labour would need to become the largest party. Now, these are academic exercises. They don't reflect what happens at the general election. Different seats do different things. But it's an interesting straw in the wind.
Yeah, interesting. OK, Sam, thank you. So, Hannah, records being broken. What else have you learned from the data?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Somerset and Frome, that was a 29% swing to the Liberal Democrats from the Conservatives. That's nearly double the swing that they needed to take the seat. It's the 6th biggest percentage majority in a Conservative defeat. It's the 9th biggest Lib Dem swing to them from the Conservatives. And it's also the lowest ever Conservative share in that seat by about 10 points. The last time that it was that low was in 1997. So breaking some records there. And then in Selby and Ainsty, that's a 24-point swing to Labour from the Conservatives. As Sam was just showing us, that's the 2nd highest ever. And that moves the South East Staffordshire seat to 3rd place, which Tony Blair won about the same distance away from the 1997 general election as we are from the next general election. So they've done better than that in this seat here.
Yeah, fascinating. Really interesting, all that information. Thank you both for the moment. Coming up on the early rundown, we'll have the rest of the day's news, including not over yet. Nigel Farage says Coots has more questions to answer after apologising for closing his account.
I'm Hannah Thomas-Peter, and I'm Sky's climate change correspondent. The UK is a world leader in wind power. Power! Power! People! It's part of the Congo Basin rainforest, which is such an important ecosystem. It's known as the lungs of Africa. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. She doesn't really enjoy speaking to the press, and it wasn't clear right up until the last moment that she was going to sit down with me.
I might be just very naive, but I do believe that change is possible, otherwise we wouldn't be climate activists.
I'm confident for the last 30 years we have known how bad it is. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to fight for the next step.
You can see just the piles and piles of stuff, these sofas and people's desks and children's books. And you can see inside this home here, people trying to sort out their home. It's just been devastating.
I think everything's at stake. The future of our planet, the future of the beauty around us, the future of you and me.
Hello again, welcome back. Let's take a look now at the day's other main stories away from those by-elections. Nigel Farage says Coutts and its owner NatWest still have questions to answer after apologising for closing his account. It's ignited a row about free speech and banking, and the government says new rules will force banks to explain and delay any decision to stop doing business with someone.
It's always good to get an apology, and particularly from somebody running a bank with 19 million customers. So thank you for the apology, but it does feel ever so slightly forced. We need wholesale review of the entire banking industry and legislation to change things. So it's a start, but it's nowhere near enough. And I'm not going to stop, because I do feel and I do hope that I'm a voice for those thousands of people that have been debanked.
Former Conservative Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher is appealing against an 8-week suspension from Parliament, which was recommended after an investigation into groping claims against him. The suspension would likely trigger a by-election in his constituency of Tamworth, which Mr Pincher now represents as an independent MP. Data from the property website Rightmove shows asking rents have reached new heights outside London. New tenants can expect to pay, on average, £1,231 per month, while asking rents inside the capital have reached more than £2,500 per month. The White House has confirmed that Ukraine's military has started using cluster munitions, which it sent to boost the country's firepower against Russia. Those are the wrong pictures, these are the right ones. The deployment put the US at odds with several NATO allies, including the UK, who've signed a convention banning the weapon.
We have gotten some initial feedback from the Ukrainians, and they're using them quite effectively. They have, again, without violating their operational security, I would just tell you that they're using them appropriately, they're using them effectively, and they are actually having an impact on Russia's defensive formations and Russia's defensive maneuvering. I think I could leave it at that.
Time now for a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So today will bring further showers to the UK and Ireland before more prolonged rain and strong winds return for the weekend. Many places are fine, if chilly in parts of the countryside, but there are showers around, especially in the west. They'll become more widespread through the morning, but southeast England will be mainly fine until lunchtime. In between the showers, expect spells of sunshine. It will be a bit cooler overall with strengthening winds in the west. Britain will see further showers through the afternoon, concentrated in the east. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see thicker cloud and more general rain moving in. That rain will spread to most places overnight, heaviest on western hills, but northern Scotland and southeast England should stay dry. It will turn chilly in the far north. On to tomorrow, well, further outbreaks of rain, heavy and prolonged in places, but northern Scotland will stay largely fine. It's going to be cool again, but the humidity will increase with strong winds in the south, bringing coastal gales. Local disruption is a possibility. And Sunday, well, that looks unsettled as well.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up shortly on the early rundown, we'll have a recap for you of the night's triple by-election results, including Labour's crushing victory in Yorkshire. But the Prime Minister has avoided a total wipeout.
I'm Inzamam Rashid and I'm Sky's North of England correspondent. We give a voice to communities often unheard and unserved from a region with a distinct history and global impact.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I'm based in Belfast, a city transformed by peace, but still struggling with its past. Politically, the two sides are as far apart as ever, and it's over that question of who has sovereignty in Northern Ireland, the very issue that's been the source of tension here for generations. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 25 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
We help you understand the world with us.
Today, we have reached an agreement with the Conservative Party on support for government in Parliament.
We already know what the government gets out of this deal. What exactly does the DUP get out of it? Well, £1.5 billion. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. You can't live in a place like this and not appreciate the environment.
It's 5:33. You're watching the early rundown with full results from last night's triple by-election. Labour has gained the seat of Selby and Ainsty in Yorkshire, where 25-year-old Keir Mather will become the youngest MP in Parliament. Well, the Liberal Democrats also overturned a majority of about 20,000 to take Somerset and Frome, with a swing against the Tories of almost 30%. But the Prime Minister was spared a by-election whitewash, with the Conservatives narrowly holding on to Boris Johnson's former constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Labour faced a backlash there over road emissions charges being imposed by London's mayor.
This message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election in his...
Also this morning, Nigel Farage says Coutts has more questions to answer after apologising for closing his account. And day 2 of the 48-hour strike by NHS consultants across England, which is causing large-scale disruption to patient care. So let's look in depth then at our top story this morning. The Prime Minister has been spared 3 by-election losses in one night. Rishi Sunak's Conservatives have narrowly beaten Labour to hold on to the constituency of Uxbridge and West Ruislip. It was, of course, at Boris Johnson's old seat. But there is still pressure on the Prime Minister, with Labour taking the Conservative seat of Selby and Ainsty in North Yorkshire. And the Lib Dems have inflicted a thumping defeat on the Conservatives in the constituency of Somerset and Frome. Well, let's take you through the results of all 3 by-elections. We'll start with Selby and Ainsty, where 25-year-old Keir Mather will become the youngest MP in the Commons, the baby of the House. He overturned a 20,137 majority, scoring 16,456 votes. Claire Holmes for the Conservatives trailing behind on 12,295. It was a historic victory. Let's hear what the winning candidate had to say.
Over the past few months, speaking to hundreds of people on the doorstep, I've encountered so much hardship. Hardship made worse by 13 years of negligence and complacency from the Conservatives. Today, that changes. The people of Selby and Ainsty have made it clear. They deserve public services that work and a thriving local economy. They deserve urgent support in the cost of living crisis, flood defences to protect our communities, and an NHS that's fit for the future. Public transport that connects us, more police on our streets, and action to protect our beautiful countryside and rivers. That's what we want, and that's why I'm here.
Let's go to Somerset and the constituency of Somerset and Frome. The Lib Dems so confident that they were going to win. They called it before midnight, said the Lib Dems were going to romp home, and so it proved. Sarah Dyke getting 21,187 votes, smashing the Conservative majority. Faye Purbrick for the Conservatives trailing behind on 10,179. Now let's hear from the Lib Dems' victorious candidate.
Like so many places across the country, we have been let down and taken for granted for far too long by a tired and out-of-touch Conservative government. While families struggle to put food on the table or pay their mortgage or simply see their GP, this government is too busy being a circus of chaos. Well, the people of Somerset and Frome have said it loud and clear tonight: enough is enough.
Well, Rishi Sunak was spared the prospect of being the first Prime Minister since 1968 to lose 3 by-elections on the same day, as Labour failed to secure a victory in Boris Johnson's old seat, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. You can see the results there. Conservative Steve Tuckwell held on with a majority of just 495. It was close, down from the 7,210 Boris Johnson secured in 2019. He got 13,965 votes. ULEZ, the emissions charge, a big issue in that seat. Let's hear from him.
This message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election in his... And we know that it was his damaging and costly ULEZ policy that lost them this election. I'm humbled and proud to be elected as the MP for the area in which I was born, raised and built a family in, and to represent my home is a huge honour.
OK, let's get the thoughts once again, shall we, of Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. So we know all the results. We've looked at the data. We've looked at the numbers. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, what will be going through their minds this morning?
Well, this is the moment where party political leaders try to stitch together a story about either why it's gone particularly well or not as badly. Inevitably, actually, what's really happened is that the British public have delivered a slightly inconvenient set of results. The Conservatives lost 2 seats, but did manage to hang on to Boris Johnson's former seat. So there's not a clean picture in that sense. I think Labour will, with quite a lot of justification, be pretty pleased with the results that we've seen. Not only have they broken records to get a toehold in the north, that Selby seat was only the 2nd seat in this parliament that they've actually taken off the Conservative Party, breaking records since the Second World War in terms of the size of the majority that they had to overturn. That Labour will count that as a win, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Sir Keir Starmer heading up there later today. It's an unusual seat. The Selby part of it is an old coal mining area. Ainsty, which is not a town, but just a sort of geographical area, much more prosperous, much more wealthier part of the constituency. When you dig down into the numbers, there's a sort of interesting phenomena, though, because what's happened is effectively round about 20,000 Tory voters stayed at home. Now, the big unknown is next year, when there's a general election, in the autumn perhaps, do those Tory voters then complete the switch and actually go across to Labour, or do they perhaps come home to the Conservative Party, having decided that although they were unhappy with the government, they can't quite do the switch? So there is that nuance on the result, but I think there's no doubt that the Conservatives will be very pleased, with the Labour Party will be very pleased with that. The Conservatives will use the Uxbridge result to claim that there's little enthusiasm for Keir Starmer, that there are unpopular Labour policies like the ULEZ, which can mean that they have grounds to fight. And I think the Tories do think that there is some traction in attacking the green positions of the Labour Party. They've done so on sort of Just Stop Oil donations and things like that. So I'd expect that to increase. The inconvenient fact for the Conservative Party is even though the Labour Party didn't win, actually the movement in the vote, the swing, was away from the Tories and towards the Labour Party to such a degree that really you would expect the Conservatives to be out of Downing Street and Labour knocking on the door of being the largest party in a parliament if that result was replicated. It never is completely perfectly replicated, but if it was, then that would be the case. And then just an out-and-out good result for the Liberal Democrats down in the southwest, 29% swing towards them away from the Tories. The sort of nuance there, the but there, is that Liberal Democrats are able to pour huge amounts of resources into a by-election, come a general election where they have to spread their resources more thinly. Well, that's often a different story, but it does perhaps mark the moment where that wipeout that we saw in 2015 of Liberal Democrats in the southwest as a result of the coalition years, Nick Clegg, Deputy Prime Minister and all of that, maybe this could be presented as a turning point away from that.
Yeah, still trailing in the national polls, of course. Sam, thank you very much. Plenty more analysis, of course, on the by-elections to come. But right now, let's take a look at one of the morning's other big stories, the 48-hour strike by many of England's most senior NHS doctors is going into its second day. The British Medical Association says consultants' real earnings have fallen by more than a third since 2010. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports on the impact of the walkout.
This will take kind of priority. Yeah. And we'll do this because it's broken.
Carol is in agony. She's already been waiting for more than 9 months for a hip operation. Now her other hip needs more immediate attention.
I fell and I knocked my eye on the cooker and I've broken my hip.
She needs emergency surgery, one service that must continue during a consultant strike.
We've had a lot of knockbacks with the COVID, haven't we? And this is only setting it back even further, isn't it? But they do a good job.
The hospital's emergency department has to stay open. Christmas-style cover will be in place, but long-term, the pressure is unsustainable.
Our plea is that the government and the unions get around the table and they find a resolution to this, because the people being impacted are our patients and those waiting for those elective treatments.
More than 750,000 surgeries and medical appointments have been rescheduled since health workers' strikes began in December. The reason there's more anxiety around these consultant strikes is because hospitals are really in uncharted territory. This is unprecedented action. When the nurses went on strike or when the junior doctors went on strike, there was always cover. This time, when the consultants go on strike, there is no one to cover them. The government has given consultants and junior doctors a 6% pay rise, but the BMA has dismissed this as derisory. Can you understand why the optics of this are so bad? We're not going to see consultants at food banks the way we saw nurses at food banks, are we?
This is not just about me wanting more money in my pay packet. This is actually about the whole workforce, having an adequate workforce to deliver healthcare that the public expects. At the moment, we don't have that. We've got too many vacancies. Consultants are continuing to leave, and that's only going to get worse unless the government actually addresses this pay issue.
There are 2 more consultant strikes next month, and the mandate for industrial action lasts until December. By then, Carol will have one hip fixed, but her wait for the other will go on. Ashish Joshi, Sky News at Preston Hospital.
Let's get your Friday sports with James.
Plenty of sporting action to update you on this morning. A stunning innings from Zach Crawley has put England in control of the 4th Ashes Test. We'll have more of the action up next. And could Tommy Fleetwood become England's first Open winner in 31 years? He's currently in a 3-way tie for the lead.
I'm Hannah Thomas-Peter, and I'm Sky's climate change correspondent. The UK is a world leader in wind power. Power! Power! People! It's part of the Congo Basin rainforest, which is such an important ecosystem. It's known as the lungs of Africa.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. She doesn't really enjoy speaking to the press, and it wasn't clear right up until the last moment that she was going to sit down with me.
I might be just very naive, but I do believe that change is possible, otherwise we wouldn't be climate activists.
I'm confident for the last 30 years we have known how bad it is. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to fight for the next step.
You can see just the piles and piles of stuff, these sofas and people's desks and children's books, and you can see inside this home here people trying to sort out their home. It's just been devastating.
I think everything's at stake. The future of our planet, the future of the beauty around us, the future of you and me.
Do you know what kind of pollen gets up your nose? Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Today will start mainly fine if chilly in parts of the countryside, but there will be a few showers which will develop more widely through the morning. In between, expect spells of sunshine, but it'll feel cooler than recently with strengthening winds in the west. During the afternoon, Northern Ireland will see thicker cloud and more general rain moving in. We're in the late stages now of the grass pollen season with little risk from weeds and trees, so pollen levels will be limited to moderate in the south, low in the north.
Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at this morning's sports news.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
The latest report from leading scientists says we're in a climate emergency and perilously close to the point of no return. But could hope come in extreme form with Extreme E?
He's got one lap to go and he has a gap of 6.2 seconds. So behind them, look, the tightest gap is between P3, Timmy Hansen, for Andretti Alpha Keelit.
Here in Glenmuckloch, some 50 miles south of Glasgow by road, electric SUVs are racing off-road on a track etched into a former coal mine, which is being transformed into a hydro project providing clean renewable energy to the region. And that juxtaposition is very deliberate indeed. Old fossil fuel polluting industry changing its ways, meeting new, dynamic, sustainable sport.
I think Extreme E is kind of a blueprint for like a future-proof motorsport. It's got all the racing, it is off-road, but it races in kind of a sustainable way. So there are a lot of things we do in different regions to highlight environmental issues in those particular regions. The drivers get very involved in that. And then also the footprint of the racing series is quite small. You can see we have inflatable paddocks. They all pack up on a ship. They go around the world on a ship.
I mean, it's so different, and I think that's why it's so exciting and bringing a whole new audience into motorsport. Is we're not taking something and just electrifying it. We're going to these remote locations that have got a purpose-built racetrack, and then we're racing wheel to wheel with other cars.
McLaren are one of 10 teams involved in this third season, which features intense doubleheader race weekends all around the world, testing for all the crew involved.
And
they've got a very short time from when they get out of the car to when they're next going to be in it, get all the systems checks done, so make sure everything's running correctly, then understand what they want from the car, then figure out what we need to do, and then go back to them and say, OK, these are the changes we think we're going to make.
Everyone on the team was getting involved, getting stuck in with repairing the bodywork or putting new vinyl on and getting the car ready to go out.
Well, all teams race in identical machinery, and these cars are something else. This is the Odyssey 21. It goes 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. It boasts 550 brake horsepower. It weighs almost 2 tons. And here on site, it's charged up by hydrogen fuel cell technology. And it has to traverse all terrains, and you're going to have the odd shunt or even roll at times. So these things have to be incredibly physically robust.
It's pretty aggressive feeling. And the difference is when you're with the other cars and they're kicking mud in your face and everything, it is difficult to even keep your cool.
6 seconds to go! Go, 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 go!
The exhilaration is there for drivers and team owners alike. Newest entry into Extreme E? Carl Cox Motorsport. Yes, the superstar DJ has his own team.
You wonder, how are they going to keep their line? How are they going to stay away from each other? It's so fast and furious in such a way that I just want to watch it, the end of the day, and it's all over in 20 minutes per race.
Time to get in the car, time for a hot lap.
Ready?
Let's do it. Whoa!
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Thank you very much, James. Well, let's get a final word on this morning's by-election results with Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Just got a couple of minutes before the top of the hour, Sam. How are you reflecting on the last few hours?
That the British public always throw up surprises. It wasn't, as the Conservatives were telling us before today, a clean sweep against them. The Uxbridge result is something that Rishi Sunak will seize upon. Of course, that was a by-election triggered by Boris Johnson, probably to be quite unhelpful to Rishi Sunak. A defeat in that and the other two would have been pretty disastrous. It's not what ended up happening. The Labour Party just fell short, didn't get quite enough of a swing. One of the surprises of this morning has been that the issue of ULEZ, and probably in bigger picture terms, just the way that Labour defend green issues, now clearly quite a bit of a problem for the Labour Party. The Liberal Democrats performing strongly down in the southwest. Big swing for them. Can they repeat that in a general election where they have to split their resources more thinly? And then up in the north, record-breaking win for Labour up in Yorkshire. The Selby by-election will be one that goes down in history. The reason that the Labour Party won is because about 20,000 Conservative voters in the 2019 general election stayed at home. So it's entirely unclear what will happen next year. However, I think Labour will savour this moment. They have now got a Labour MP in a seat that has never been Labour before. That's a win by any stretch of the imagination.
So thumping defeats for the Conservatives in 2 out of 3 of the seats and a very narrow win in the third. What does it mean for Rishi Sunak?
I mean, the big picture is that in all the seats, the 3 seats that we've seen, there is quite a substantial swing away from the Conservative Party. In fact, the swings would not see in any of the swings would, if replicated after general election, would not see the Conservatives staying in Downing Street. They would see either a Labour minority government, quite possibly Labour as the largest party. So the Selby one points to something quite substantially more. So although the Tory party will spin some relief at not losing Uxbridge, the pattern is very clear and not good for Rishi Sunak.
OK, all right. Thank you very much, Sam. We'll speak again in the next hour. Right now, let's have a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the headline is today will bring further showers to the UK and Ireland before more prolonged rain and strong winds return for the weekend. Many places are fine, if a little chilly in parts of the countryside, but there are showers around, especially in the west. They'll become more widespread through the morning, but southeast England will be mainly fine until lunchtime. In between the showers, expect some spells of sunshine. It is going to be a little bit cooler overall with strengthening winds in the west. Now, Britain will see further showers through the afternoon, concentrated in the east of the country. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland we'll see thicker cloud and more general rain moving in. That rain will spread to most places overnight, heaviest on western hills, but northern Scotland and southeast England should stay dry. It will turn chilly in the far north. On to tomorrow then, it will bring further outbreaks of rain, heavy and prolonged in places, but northern Scotland will stay largely fine. It's going to be cool again, but the humidity will increase with strong winds in the south, bringing coastal gales. Local disruption is possible. Sunday looks unsettled too.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up in the next hour on the early rundown, it's been a mixed night for the Conservatives in the triple by-election, holding Boris Johnson's old seat but losing 2 others to Labour and the Lib Dems. Hello, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Jonathan Samuels. This is the early rundown with extended coverage of the night's by-election results, which saw 2 defeats for Rishi Sunak in what were once safe Conservative constituencies. Labour has won the North Yorkshire seat of Selby and Ainsty. The party says it's the highest majority they've ever overturned in a by-election. Well, the Lib Dems secured a sizable swing of almost 30% to take Somerset and Frome from the Conservatives. But the Prime Minister was spared a by-election whitewash, with the Conservatives narrowly holding on to Boris Johnson's former constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Labour faced a backlash there over road emissions charges being imposed by London's mayor.
This message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election in his...
Also this morning, Nigel Farage says Coutts has more questions to answer after apologising for closing his account. And day 2 of the 48-hour strike by NHS consultants across England, which is causing large-scale disruption to patient care. A very good morning and welcome to the early rundown, which will be dominated by the results of the triple by-election. And the Prime Minister has been spared 3 losses in one night. Rishi Sunak's Conservatives have narrowly beaten Labour to hold on to the constituency of Uxbridge and West Ruislip, which was, of course, Boris Johnson's old seat. But there is still pressure on the PM, with a big swing to Labour, seeing Sir Keir Starmer's party taking the Conservative seat of Selby and Ainsty in North Yorkshire. And the Lib Dems have also inflicted a thumping defeat on the Conservatives in the constituency of Somerset and Frome. Well, let's take you through the results of all 3 of the by-elections, shall we? Selby and Ainsty won by Labour. And you can see the results there. Keir Mather, just 25 years old, 16,456 votes. Claire Holmes trailing behind, 12,295 votes for her. This is what the winning Labour candidate had to say.
Over the past few months, speaking to hundreds of people on the doorstep, I've encountered so much hardship. Hardship made worse by 13 years of negligence and complacency from the Conservatives. Today, that changes. The people of Selby and Ainsty have made it clear. They deserve public services that work and a thriving local economy. They deserve urgent support in the cost of living crisis, flood defences to protect our communities, and an NHS that's fit for the future. Public transport that connects us, more police on our streets, and action to protect our beautiful countryside and rivers. That's what we want, and that's why I'm here.
Well, the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, said the Somerset and Frome result shows that his party was once again winning votes in its former West Country heartland. There was a 29 percentage point swing in that constituency. Sarah Dyke winning for the Lib Dems, 21,187 votes. And Faye Purbrick for the Conservatives, look at that, just on 10,179. So an 11,000 vote cushion for the new MP. After the result, this is what she had to say.
Like so many places across the country, we have been let down and taken for granted for far too long by a tired and out-of-touch Conservative government. While families struggle to put food on the table or pay their mortgage or simply see their GP, this government is too busy being a circus of chaos. Well, the people of Somerset and Frome have said it loud and clear tonight: enough is enough.
Now, Rishi Sunak was spared the prospect of being the first Prime Minister since 1968 to lose 3 by-elections on the same day, as Labour failed to secure a victory in Boris Johnson's former seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Those are the results from overnight. Conservative Steve Tuckwell held on with a majority of just 495. There was a recount at one stage, down from the 7,210 that Boris Johnson secured back in 2019. This is what he had to say afterwards.
This message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election in his... And we know that it was his damaging and costly ULEZ policy that lost them this election. I'm humbled and proud to be elected as the MP for the area in which I was born, raised and built a family in, and to represent my home is a huge honour.
So let's get the thoughts of our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. We know all the results now, Sam. What's your initial impression of what happened?
So there were predictions, particularly from the Conservative Party, that it would be a clean sweep of losses for them overnight. That didn't happen. 2 losses, 1 victory in Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge. But if there's one thing that strikes me more than anything else, it's that when you look at the results across all 3 seats, you see a swing away from the Conservatives and towards, in 2 cases, the Labour Party, in 1 case, the Liberal Democrats. Swings of a size that, if replicated in a general election, mean that the Conservatives would be out of number 10, potentially with the largest party in a hung parliament, potentially with an overall majority. It's quite hard to read too much into it, but the direction of travel of British politics is once again clear. Just as it was during the local elections in May, so too really the biggest picture of all, I think, is evident again this morning as the sun comes up. Of those 3 results, you had a swing away from the Conservatives in Uxbridge, but that was 6.5%, not quite enough to oust the Conservatives in Boris Johnson's old stomping ground, and therefore they hang on. Clearly a big conversation inside the Labour Party about ULEZ, which is being blamed for the fact that they didn't take the seat in the way that they'd been hoping. How does the Labour Party sell green issues in an environment where clearly the Tories are going to come after them ever more strongly, scenting some electoral advantage by doing that? You had that extraordinary further Lib Dem by-election victory down in the southwest in Somerset. Somerset and Frome, a 29% swing to the Liberal Democrats. They're very good at doing that when they can pour all of their resources into 1 seat. Can you do that at a general election? Well, that'll be the question for next year. And then that record-breaking result up in Yorkshire, 20 minutes away from York, is the Selby constituency, Selby and Ainsty. Now, that basically 20,000 Tory voters stayed at home. You saw the largest ever majority since the Second World War overturned, so breaking records there for Labour to elect its first ever MP for that seat. That is the thing that the Labour Party will point to. Does lots of Tory voters staying at home mean that that seat is in the bag at the next year's general election? Well, it's too early to say, but I think the record-breaking nature of that triumph, overturning a hurdle that high, is something that Labour are going to want to spend quite a lot of time dwelling on.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sam, thank you very much for the moment. Well, our political correspondents have been at all 3 constituencies for the build-up and the declarations as well. Let's go to Liz Bates in Selby in North Yorkshire first. And Liz, as Sam was saying there, Labour certainly smashed the Conservatives' majority.
Oh, absolutely. And look, this scene doesn't look like much now, a kind of empty car park, empty leisure centre. But what happened here overnight was a hugely significant moment for the Labour Party, a victory that not even the most positive Labour activists were predicting in the end. They needed an 18% swing to take the seat. They got a 23.7% swing, a 4,000 majority, and that makes Keir Mather the first ever in this constituency Labour MP. He is very young, he's 25. That will make him the baby of the House, the youngest MP in the House of Commons. A massive achievement for the party, overturning a 20,000 majority, the first time that they have ever achieved that in a by-election. The Conservatives saying that this is midterm blues, but I think it's quite clear that it's more than that. In terms of how both parties, I think, will be feeling in the wake of this result, for the Labour Party, I think they will be starting to really believe that the clear leads that they are seeing in the national polls can be converted into votes when it comes to by-elections, but also in a general election. They will be starting to believe that they really can believe in those polls and potentially form a government. For the Conservatives, they'll be playing this down publicly, but I think behind the scenes they will be really worried about this result, not least because of the makeup of this constituency. Parts of it are real traditional Tory strongholds, the kind of leafy villages of this constituency, but there are other areas where there were some of those kind of 2019 more like red wall voters that joined the party because of Brexit and because of Boris Johnson. If they are losing support in both of those areas, they will be thinking, how on earth do they rebuild after this result? And that's something that they'll be thinking about for certainly weeks and probably months to come. But in terms of this constituency, this result, I think what we're expecting this morning is for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, to come up to this area to celebrate this victory, putting to one side the fact that he's still not particularly popular on the doorstep. People still willing to vote for the party in spite of their feelings towards him. He will be thinking a win is a win, and he'll be celebrating it this morning.
OK, Liz, thank you very much. Our political correspondent Amanda Acas is in Shepton Mallet in the constituency of Somerset and Frome in Somerset, of course. Another big majority overturned there, this time by the Lib Dems.
Yes, indeed. So the Bath and West Showground, where I'm standing now, will soon be going back to its regular use for parading cattle. But just before midnight, there were scenes of real drama here as the Liberal Democrats decided to announce live on Sky News that they were confident enough of victory to declare that they'd won before all of the ballot boxes had even arrived here to be counted, because their activists had seen enough of the papers being verified to be sure that they had managed to overturn the 19,000-strong Conservative majority. And then around 3 hours later, we had the confirmation. Sarah Dyke, their candidate, a local councillor, a member of a farming family who've been here for generations, had won with a majority of 11,000 and a massive swing of 29%. Now, she gave quite a passionate, emotional speech in which she said she'd given everything to this campaign. She thanked voters, particularly those who'd previously voted for other parties, for trusting her with their votes, and said it was down to the Tories being tired and worn out and out of touch. Now, that may be the case, but the circumstances of this by-election were quite particular. It was called because of the resignation of the Tory MP David Warburton, who really was mired in scandal. He'd admitted taking cocaine. He was accused of sexual harassment of 2 women, which he denied. And so many Conservative activists I spoke to tonight said that was the reason that they lost so badly, because when they knocked on the doors of traditional Tory voters, they said they weren't going to come out and vote. They were fed up. They felt let down by his behaviour. Having said that, traditionally, this is a seat which has been Liberal Democrat before. So David Warburton won it in 2015 in that big swing away from the Liberal Democrats after the coalition era. But the 18 years previously, it had been a Liberal Democrat seat. And in recent years, particularly council elections here in Somerset last year, Lib Dems did make quite big gains. And the party here are really celebrating, saying this is their 4th by-election win in similar circumstances since the last general election in 2019. They say that this shows they're winning back voters, rebuilding their strongholds, particularly in places like this in the southwest, which traditionally they have had a strong presence at. The Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine was here earlier. She told me that Tory MPs across the country will be looking at this result and they'll be scared.
OK, Amanda in Shepton Mallet, thank you very much. And finally, let's go to Sky's chief political correspondent, John Craig. He's in Ruislip, Boris Johnson's former constituency. It's there that the Conservatives are celebrating a narrow win, John.
Yes, just under 500 votes, the majority. It was always going to be the Tories' hope to referendum on the controversial ULEZ policy of Sadiq Khan, London's Labour mayor, charging people with older diesel cars and vans £12.50 a day to drive them in outer boroughs like this. And it has backfired spectacularly for Labour. It's killing Labour votes in the suburbs. We now have proof of that. Now, when I arrived here shortly before the polls closed last night, a senior local government official with no political axe to grind, I asked her how he thought the campaign had gone. He said to me, well, the Labour Party initially thought they were going to win this by-election comfortably. They totally underestimated the unpopularity of the ULEZ policy. And when he made his speech, when he claimed, celebrated victory, the Tory candidate just launched into an attack on the ULEZ policy and said it was Sadiq Khan who'd lost the election for Labour. When I spoke to an MP, the MP for the next door seat, that's David Simmons, he's MP for Ruislip and Northwood and Pinner, he was saying this is going to have major implications for politics across London. because a lot of those Labour MPs who are already furious about ULEZ are going to step up their campaign against it. And those Tories in the suburbs who've been fretting about losing their seats now can see some hope. And then, of course, it's the London mayoral elections next year. Sadiq Khan has got plenty to worry about now, even though the Tories have picked a virtual unknown in Susan Hall to stand against him. What if Jeremy Corbyn stands, splits the left vote? But the inquest in Labour is already underway. Steve Reid, who is the Shadow Justice Secretary, was running this campaign, has said that the winning Conservative candidate said if it wasn't for ULEZ, he believes Labour would have won. It did resonate with a lot of people, said Mr Reid. They didn't like the fact that ULEZ was going to cost people more to drive around at a time when there's a cost of living crisis going on. That's what Danny Beales, the Labour candidate, was saying. Well, in actual fact, he performed a U-turn during the campaign at a hustings chaired by our political correspondent Rob Powell, when he said, not the right time to bring it in now, got to delay it because of the cost of living crisis. And Mr Reid said this: when the voters speak, any party that seeks to govern has to listen. So that's what Labour will be doing after this. So a pledge to listen to the voters. Well, the ULEZ is going to hit White Van Man. White Van Man has certainly had his revenge here today.
And there's one in the background. All right, John, thank you very much. John Craig there. Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP and Pensions Minister, Laura Trott. Great to see you this early hour. So, thumping defeats then in 2 out of 3 seats and only the very narrowest of win in a third.
Well, look, it was a mixed set of results for us. We know that we've got a lot to do to win back trust from the electorate. That's why we've been focused on, very clearly on the Prime Minister's 5 priorities, halving inflation, making sure we're growing the economy, cutting the debt, cutting the waiting lists and stopping the boats. But what we've also seen today is just no overwhelming love for Starmer, right? Like, the electorate are not sold on him. And I think that's come through very clearly in these results.
It's a bit more than a mixed set of results, though, isn't it? A record-breaking defeat in Selby, where you had a huge majority.
Yeah, but Labour lost their deposit in Somerton. It's a very mixed picture. We had a great victory in Uxbridge. I think we had the candidate there, Steve Tuckwell, an activist, Conservative activist.
Is that great, just 400 votes?
Well, no, I mean, this is after a long period of us in government and, governing parties don't tend to win by-elections. We know that. But I think people in London have had a foretaste of what a Labour government would be like, right? Putting an unfair tax on people's cars, which hits the poorest the most. Right, that is what a Labour government would deliver. This is a policy that was backed by Keir Starmer. It's punitive, affects, pensioners going out trying to go to hospital, and people reacted very strongly in Uxbridge.
Boris Johnson came up
that.
with it, didn't he, I think?
Well, I mean, it's a policy which has been implemented by a Labour mayor and backed by the leader of the Labour Party.
In Selby, the Conservative voters simply didn't turn up, did they? They stayed at home, 20,000 of them.
Yeah, we've had a really tough couple of years. I don't think anybody is denying that. And what we're doing now is working really hard, as I said, on the issues that are really facing the country. And we've seen some progress because of the work the Prime Minister and the Government has done. This week, the headline rate of inflation has fallen a bit, the lowest rate since March last year. We're not complacent about that. We know how tough the things are out there. But it's good to see some progress. Ditto, we had a huge deal this week on Tata Steel, so the investment in the Gigafactory as well. We're seeing some really big progress on that and small boats as well. So we know we've got a lot of work to do. We totally get that. And everyone in government at the moment is focused on rebuilding that trust with the electorate.
The reality is, though, that even though you won in Uxbridge, if you look at the swing in all 3 seats, if that was translated to a general election, the Tories would be ousted.
Well, I've been in politics for a long time. In 2012, in the Corby by-election, there was a huge swing against us to Labour. That was not replicated at a general election. By-elections tend to try to send a governing party a message, and we've got it. We have to do more work to regain that trust, but absolutely, it's very, very clear that the public out there are just not sold on Labour. And that's because, this is a guy who just hasn't got the answers to the big questions facing the country. If you look last weekend, he couldn't even commit to the inflation target, right? It's extraordinary at a time of a cost of living crisis. You know, someone who just doesn't know what he's going to do about the doctor strikes. You know, they said they get back round the table, but will they talk about pay? Won't they talk about pay? Who knows? I mean, this guy will say anything to get himself into power, and the public get that.
He's not your only problem, is he? Look at the Somerset and Frome result. You're going to be fighting the next general election on two fronts.
Yeah, I mean, of course we are, right? We're going to be fighting for every single vote, and we're going to be doing that by trying to get inflation down, growing the economy, cutting the debt, stopping the votes, cutting the waiting list. That's what we're going to be doing, because those are the things that we know people really, really care about. And we have to earn people's votes back. We totally get that.
Lord, you acknowledge the public's grumpiness. How much of it is Liz Truss's fault?
We had a really bad year last year. I don't think anybody is denying that. I'm not going to come on here and say that last year was a great year for the Conservatives. That's why, you know, we're in the situation that we are.
Because there seems to be quite a clear signal from the electorate, both at the local elections and today, that they're unhappy with the Conservative Party. But the answer from supporters of Rishi Sunak is we're doing the right thing, and you just point to Liz Truss last year as the reason for the unhappiness. How fair is that?
I think that last year, as I said, wasn't a great year for us. And that's why you're right, we are doing the right things right now. We do have a brilliant Prime Minister who is really, I think, achieving results for the country, which is what we all need to see. You know, we need to be sitting here in government, you know, showing that energy, showing that fight, showing that we are trying to do things which are going to help people at a really tricky time right now. And I think if we do that, then we will earn back people's trust and we will earn back their votes. And as I said, you know, the opposition that we're facing is one who can't keep a policy position for more than 5 minutes, right? He will literally, Keir Starmer, say anything to get elected. And the public see that.
One very quick question. Your colleague, Johnny Mercer, he compared the new Labour MP in Selby to the In-Betweeners. Are you comfortable with that?
I mean, I like the In-Betweeners, Sam. But no, I think that Johnny is Johnny, and he's wonderful, and he has a way of expressing himself.
All right, I think we'll leave it there, shall we? Conservative MP, Pensions Minister Laura Trott, thank you very much for coming in. Good to see you. And from 7am on Sky News Breakfast, Anna Jones will have plenty more coverage and analysis of those by-election results. Her guests include the Conservative Party Chair, Greg Hands, Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, and also Daisy Cooper, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, all from 7 o'clock. Coming up next on the Early Rundown, we'll have the rest of the day's news, including Not Over Yet. Nigel Farage says Coots has more questions to answer after apologising for closing his account.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
They're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
welcome back. Good to have you with us this morning. Now, Nigel Farage says Coutts and its owner NatWest still have questions to answer after apologising for closing his account. It's ignited a row about free speech and banking, and the government says new rules will force banks to explain and delay any decision to stop doing business with customers.
It's always good to get an apology, and particularly from somebody running a bank with 19 million customers. So thank you for the apology, but it does feel ever so slightly forced. We need wholesale review of the entire banking industry and legislation to change things. So it's a start, but it's nowhere near enough. And I'm not going to stop, because I do feel and I do hope that I'm a voice for those thousands of people that have been debanked.
Nigel Farage speaking earlier. Well, Sky's Milena Veselinovic is here. Good morning. So he says he's been proven right.
He certainly feels vindicated, because he has been saying all along that the reason why his account was shut down was because of his political views. Now, from the beginning, the bank said, well, that's not the reason why we normally shut down people's accounts. However, he got his hands on this 40-page dossier where executives discussed him and called him racist, called him xenophobic. And he says that that was one of the factors, well, he believes that is the main factor why his account was suspended. So there was a lot of pressure on Coutts and the parent company, NatWest, to respond to this. And we did get a response in the form of an apology from the group CEO, Alison Rose, to Mr. Farage. I'm going to read you some of that apology. In it, she says, I'm writing to apologise for deeply inappropriate comments about yourself made in the now published papers for the Wealth Committee. I would like to make it clear that they do not reflect the view of the bank. I believe very strongly that freedom of expression and access to banking are fundamental to our society, and it is absolutely not our policy to exit a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views. Now, this letter comes at a time when the Treasury has made it stricter and more difficult for banks to shut down people's accounts. They'll have to say why they're doing it. They'll also have to extend the notice period from 30 days to 90 days so that people can try to find a new bank or challenge that decision. Now, Mr. Farage has been offered another account within the NatWest group, NatWest, which owns Coutts, but he's been a bit lukewarm about the apology. I'm going to read you some of the response in the tweet that he's had to that. He said, in a tweet, Dame Alison Rose's apology is a start, but it is no more than that. She needs to take responsibility as CEO and is wrong to say the views of her own committee's report don't reflect the bank. I will now defend thousands of other people that have been debanked on her watch. So fair to say this issue has brought him firmly back into the spotlight, but it also does raise very important questions about the powers that banks have to shut down people's accounts, because it is fair to say that in modern society, you can't really participate without a bank account, and that is important.
Yeah, who knew the word debanked even existed until the last couple of days? Yeah, Milena, thank you very much indeed. Do stay with us here on the early rundown. Coming up in a moment, we'll have a recap for you of the night's triple by-election results, including Labour's crushing victory in Yorkshire. But the Prime Minister has avoided a total wipeout. The details in a couple of minutes.
So my great-grandmother unfortunately had a fall last week and was in hospital for surgery over the weekend. She broke her hip, and any surgery at 99 years old is, of course, incredibly serious. And this week I travelled to Hungary to pick up a very special book which once belonged to my great-grandmother's youngest brother, Bela Engelman, who was murdered in Auschwitz, aged 13, for no other reason than the fact that he was born Jewish. My great-grandmother's mother, youngest sister, and youngest brother, Bela, were murdered in Auschwitz on the 9th of July, 1944. And my great-grandmother has no trace of her youngest brother. There is no photo, no grave, no birth certificate, and no death certificate. So this book, which I have here in the studio, which has his name stamped and also his name in Hebrew, is the only trace we have to his existence and the only trace that my great-grandmother, the only link that she has to show that her great-grandmother ever existed other than her own memory. So it was incredibly special to be able to go and visit her in hospital and give her this book, because to see that look on her face, my great-grandmother has dedicated so much of her life to educating about the Holocaust, ensuring that people learn the lessons of hatred and tolerance. And so to be able to give her something and see that smile on her face after what has been a quite difficult period for her and the family was really so special. She was born in 1923, which makes her nearly 100. And she was the eldest of 6 children. She often speaks about her childhood, a very loving, happy childhood, surrounded by family. Her family had lived in this town for hundreds of years, and they were one of the biggest families in the town. And it was quite a large Jewish population. And in March 1944, the Nazis invaded Hungary, and within a few weeks, or days even, everything changed. They were marched out of their homes, told to pack as many belongings as they could into one bag, and they were taken to the smallest and poorest part of the town, and they were put into the ghetto. And they were there for a few weeks before being transported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, together with the whole town, over 100 members of her extended family. And she was in Auschwitz for 4 months. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Dr. Mengele, the infamous angel of death, as so many survivors call him. And they were split up. She never got to say goodbye to her mother and youngest sister and youngest brother. And she and her other 2 sisters were sent to work in Auschwitz. They were there for 4 months before, in October 1944, being transported to a slave labour camp. And then in April 1945, they were taken on the death march. 5 days, no food, no water, marching. And then they were greeted by American soldiers. My great-grandmother calls them the Angel Liberators, and they allowed her to restart her life.
Hello again, welcome back. You're watching the Early Rundown. Thanks for your company this morning. Our top story, the Prime Minister has been spared 3 losses in one night. Rishi Sunak's Conservatives have narrowly beaten Labour to hold on to the constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip, which was Boris Johnson's old seat. But there is still pressure on the Prime Minister, with a big swing to Labour, seeing Sir Keir Starmer's party taking the Conservative seat of Selby and Ainsty in North Yorkshire. And the Lib Dems also inflicted a thumping defeat on the Conservatives. That was in the constituency of Somerset and Frome in Somerset. Well, let's take you through the results of all 3 by-elections, shall we? Starting with Selby and Ainsty, where 25-year-old Keir Mather will become the youngest MP in the Commons, the baby of the House, after overturning a 20,137 majority. He secured a 4,161 majority in the North Yorkshire seat. Labour say it was the highest majority the party had ever overturned in a by-election. Keir Mather winning with 16,456 votes. This is what he had to say after his win.
Over the past few months, speaking to hundreds of people on the doorstep, I've encountered so much hardship. Hardship made worse by 13 years of negligence and complacency from the Conservatives. Today, that changes. The people of Selby and Ainsty have made it clear. They deserve public services that work and a thriving local economy. They deserve urgent support in the cost of living crisis, flood defences to protect our communities, and an NHS that's fit for the future. Public transport that connects us, more police on our streets, and action to protect our beautiful countryside and rivers. That's what we want, and that's why I'm here.
Let's take you to Somerset and Frome in Somerset. Now, before midnight, the Lib Dems said that they were going to romp home in this seat, and so they did. Look at those numbers. Sarah Dyke becoming the new MP for the Lib Dems, 21,187 votes. Faith Purbrick for the Conservatives trailing far behind with just over 10,000 votes. This is what she had to say after her win.
Like so many places across the country, we have been let down and taken for granted for far too long by a tired and out-of-touch Conservative government. While families struggle to put food on the table or pay their mortgage or simply see their GP, this government is too busy being a circus of chaos. Well, the people of Somerset and Frome have said it loud and clear tonight: enough is enough.
Well, Rishi Sunak was spared the prospect of being the first Prime Minister since 1968 to lose 3 by-elections on the same day because Labour failed to secure victory in Boris Johnson's old seat, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. The details here for you. Conservative Steve Tuckwell holding on with a majority of just 495. It was certainly close, down from the 7,210 that Boris Johnson secured in 2019. The local issue of ULEZ, vehicle emissions, was a big deal in this seat. This is what the new MP, Steve Tuckwell, had to say.
This message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election in his... And we know that it was his damaging and costly ULEZ policy that lost them this election. I'm humbled and proud to be elected as the MP for the area in which I was born, raised and built a family in, and to represent my home is a huge honour.
Joining me here in the studio, Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates, and also our election analyst, Dr Hannah Bunting. Good to see you both again. So we've finally managed to digest all the results. What's your analysis? What are your thoughts?
Well, unsurprisingly, it is the Selby result that Labour are seizing upon. Keir Starmer in the last few moments has just tweeted his congratulations to Keir Mather. Last night, says Keir Starmer, Selby and Ainsty made history. This incredible result shows how powerful the demand for change is. Only Labour can deliver that change and build a better Britain. And indeed, it was a record-breaking result. It's the largest majority overturned by the Labour Party of the Conservatives in a by-election since the Second World War. And so it is unsurprising that that's probably where we're going to see Keir Starmer pop up later today. Unsurprising that that's the focus of his social media action. It's interesting looking at digging down into the sort of voting numbers. What happened in Selby is that something in the region of 20,000 Tory voters didn't turn out. And there doesn't seem to be a great deal of evidence of switching. The Labour figure went up a little bit, but the Conservative voting figure just plummeted. So the big question for the Labour Party, if we're looking in the context of a general election, is do those Tory voters who stayed at home come back next year, support the Labour Party next year, or go back to the Tories next year? So that's the big essay question there, but no doubt a big result, a big win for the Labour Party that we'll be hearing about for some days to come. You look at Uxbridge, and there you have a disappointing result for the Labour Party. They rather stupidly allowed the idea that all 3 seats were going to be lost to take hold in Westminster. They didn't really challenge that robustly enough, and so they are having to sort of come to terms with that and spin their way out of that as best they can at the moment. In the end, it was quite a close victory. The swing was away from the Conservative Party and to Labour of a scale that, if replicated, never is completely replicated, but if replicated would mean the Conservatives were no longer in Downing Street. So it's not a terrible result when looking at the overall picture, but a loss is a loss, and I think Labour disappointed there. Big win for the Lib Dems. They're good at by-election victories because they can pour in all their resources. Again, the question is, does this mark the turning point for the Lib Dems' return to the South West? They're, of course, wiped out in 2015 after the coalition, Tories benefiting then, but now back. Is this back in a big way, or is this the start of something smaller? We will find out. That's the picture, really, when you dig down into the numbers. The Tories coming to terms with it all. They're trying to claim that there is no love for Keir Starmer. Indeed, Johnny Mercer going for the new candidate, the new Labour candidate in Selby, the new MP in Selby, who's just 25. We should listen to what Johnny Mercer said about him a few moments ago.
I think it's always good to get new people in politics. I mean, I think we mustn't become a sort of repeat of the in-betweeners, right? So I think you've got to have people who've actually done stuff. Well, this guy has you know, he's been at Oxford University more than he's been in a job. You put a chip in him there and he just relates Labour lines. And the problem is people have kind of had enough of that, right? They want people who are authentic, people who've worked in that constituency, who know what life is like, understand what life is like, you know, to live, work and raise a family in communities like theirs. So no, I'm afraid I don't agree with this style of politics. It's exactly why people like me didn't vote before the 2015 election, because you've got people with nothing to do with the constituency just dropped in and, you know, put a chip in them and they'll start parroting Labour Party politics.
So there in his own inimicable style, the Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, suggesting maybe that the new Labour MP in Selby effectively doesn't have enough life experience, which is quite a punchy claim given, you know, the Conservative Party have just put a whole load of 29-year-old peers in the House of Lords, and there are colleagues that have entered the green benches on the Conservative side who are 24, not even 25. Has he caused a row? Yes. We'll be covering it all day on Sky News, I hope so.
Well, he's certainly proven that experience doesn't necessarily win you elections as well, hasn't he? OK, Sam, thank you. So Keir Starmer, when he tweeted his congratulations, said that the Labour Party had made history, Hannah, and he's absolutely right, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is. So in Selby, there was nearly a 24-point swing to Labour from the Conservatives. That's the second highest swing to Labour from the Conservatives in Conservative defeats ever in by-elections. And that beats Blair's South East Staffordshire, which was in 1996 about the same distance away from the 1997 general election as we are now from the next general election.
That's really interesting. And tell me about the result in Somerset and Frome as well.
Yeah, so that was 29% swing to the Liberal Democrats, who are excellent local campaigners and do really, really well in by-elections. That was nearly double the swing that they actually needed just to win it. So they won it by a West Country mile. It was the 9th biggest Lib Dem swing from the Conservatives, the 6th biggest percentage Conservative defeat when we're looking at majorities, and the lowest ever Conservative vote share in that area. Previously, that was in 1997, but this is 10 points lower than it was in that year.
And finally, what can you tell us about Uxbridge and South Ruislip?
Yeah, so the picture's a little bit more complicated here because although there was a swing to Labour from the Conservatives, it wasn't quite enough for Labour to take that seat. They got 6.7 swing, but they needed just about a point more to be able to actually take that seat.
OK, Dr Hannah Bunting taking us through the numbers. Thank you very much. Why don't we get a look at the sport now? James is here. A stunning innings from Zach Crawley has put England in control of the 4th Ashes Test. We'll have more on the action with James in a moment. And could Tommy Fleetwood become England's first Open winner in 31 years? He's currently in a 3-way tie for the lead.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Do you know what kind of pollen gets up your nose? Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Today will start mainly fine, if chilly in parts of the countryside, but there will be a few showers which will develop more widely through the morning. In between, expect spells of sunshine, but it will feel cooler than recently, with strengthening winds in the west. During the afternoon, Northern Ireland will see thicker cloud and more general rain moving in. We're in the late stages now of the grass pollen season, with little risk from weeds and trees, so pollen levels will be limited to moderate in the south, low in the north.
Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Time now to take a look at this morning's sports news. Here is James, really.
I am here now, I promise. Coming up in the sport, Zach Crawley kept England's hopes of winning the Ashes well and truly alive, and it was a good day at the Open Championship for England's Thomas Fleetwood.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
The latest reports from leading scientists says we're in a climate emergency and perilously close to the point of no return. But could hope come in extreme form with Extreme E?
He's got 1 lap to go and he has a gap of 6.2 seconds. So behind them, look, the tightest gap is between P3, Timmy Hansen, for Andretti Alpha Keelit.
Here in Glenmuckloch, some 50 miles south of Glasgow by road, electric SUVs are racing off-road on a track etched into a former coal mine, which is being transformed into a hydro project providing clean renewable energy to the region. And that juxtaposition is very deliberate indeed. Old fossil fuel polluting industry changing its ways, meeting new, dynamic, sustainable sport.
I think Extreme E is kind of a blueprint for like a future-proof motorsport. It's got all the racing, it is off-road, but it races in kind of a sustainable way. So there are a lot of things we do in different regions to highlight environmental issues in those particular regions. The drivers get very involved in that. And then also the footprint of the racing series is quite small. You can see we have inflatable paddocks. They all pack up on a ship. They go around the world on a ship.
I mean, it's so different, and I think that's why it's so exciting and bringing a whole new audience into motorsport. Is we're not taking something and just electrifying it. We're going to these remote locations that have got a purpose-built racetrack, and then we're racing wheel to wheel with other cars.
McLaren are one of 10 teams involved in this third season, which features intense double-header race weekends all around the world, testing for all the crew involved.
So they've got a very short time from when they get out of the car to when they're next going to be in it, get all the systems checks done, so make sure everything's running correctly, then understand what they want from the car, then figure out what we need to do, and then go back to them and say, OK, these are the changes we think we're going to make.
Everyone on the team was getting involved, getting stuck in with repairing the bodywork or putting new vinyl on and getting the car ready to go out.
Well, all teams race in identical machinery, and these cars are something else. This is the Odyssey 21. It goes 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. It boasts 550 brake horsepower. It weighs almost 2 tons. And here on site, it's charged up by hydrogen fuel cell technology. And it has to traverse all terrains, and you're going to have the odd shunt or even roll at times. So these things have to be incredibly physically robust.
It's pretty aggressive feeling. And the difference is when you're with the other cars and they're kicking mud in your face and everything, it is difficult to even keep your cool.
6 seconds to go! Go, 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 go!
The acceleration is there for drivers and team owners alike. Newest entry into Extreme E? Carl Cox Motorsport. Yes, the superstar DJ has his own team.
You wonder, how are they going to keep their line? How are they going to stay away from each other? It's so fast and furious in such a way that I just want to watch it, at the end of the day, and it's all over in 20 minutes per race.
Time to get in the car, time for a hot lap.
Ready?
Let's do it. Whoa!
Oh my God, that's insane!
That is...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Coming up to 7 o'clock, but before we go, let's get some final thoughts from Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. And Sam, just having a look at Twitter, Boris Johnson has tweeted, he says the following: fantastic news from Uxbridge, well done, Steve Tuckwell, and the amazing Conservative Council and Association members. This shows the Conservatives can win in London and around the country. But it was a narrow win, wasn't it?
Yeah, at this point my head is hurting, and not just because we've been on air for quite a long time, Jonathan. Boris Johnson quit Parliament, partly because he would possibly have been slung out anyway, but coordinated with allies to trigger a series of by-elections to cause problems for Rishi Sunak. And in the tweet that you read out, he was, in a sense, praising the ability of his successor to win the seat in Uxbridge and the importance of Tory London mayors, of which he was one, and how success there can breed success around the country. I mean, it is shameless is one word for it. It will stop people, supporters of Boris Johnson, sort of critics of Boris Johnson, sort of attacking the former Prime Minister for causing problems, given that it's the seat that, you know, some of his stardust has rubbed off on that has allowed the Conservatives to keep hold of Uxbridge, when just a few days ago it was even the Tory party chairman suggesting that they were going to lose all three of tonight's seats. And overall, that's part of this bigger picture where really the British public don't always deliver a totally clean result. 2 losses for the Tories, 1 hold, which would probably be just enough to stave off absolute panic in the Conservative Party. But when you dig down and look at the swings, look, in every seat you have, you know, a clear sign that people are going away from the Conservatives and towards, in 2 cases, Labour, in 1 case, the Liberal Democrats, in quite significant numbers. That means that we are on course for the Conservatives to lose Downing Street in a general election next year, if the results are anything like that. So is it just, given that there is 1 by-election that they where they held on, reason enough not to panic? Well, actually, possibly not. But nevertheless, the spinners will be cranking up their machine today inside the Conservative Party to say this isn't evidence of clear success for Keir Starmer, that they have a chance. But actually, I think on balance, the biggest loser tonight is the Tories. Yeah, and just finally, it's you know, you shouldn't predict a general election from the results of local elections, but inevitably people will. It's still looking as if it would be a hung parliament, though, isn't it? I don't think we can say that. The results that we got, we don't have enough results to present a clear picture. I would say all we can say is that given the margin, the small margin that would mean the Tories lose Downing Street, because they don't have any nobody else will work with them in Parliament. Nobody else will be their coalition partners in a hung Parliament. If they don't get a majority, they're pretty much out on their ear. Then I think it's incredibly hard for the Tories to cling on, and there's not much sign that the public are moving towards them. There are plenty of signs tonight that they're moving away. All right, fascinating stuff. You've done a sterling job. Thank you for the last few hours. Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor there. We're going to take a quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So today it will bring further showers to the UK and Ireland before more prolonged rain and strong winds return for the weekend. Many places are fine, if a little chilly in parts of the countryside, but there are showers around, especially in the west. They'll become more widespread through the morning, but southeast England will be mainly fine until lunchtime. In between the showers, expect spells of sunshine. It'll be a bit cooler overall with strengthening winds in the west. Now, Britain will see further showers through the afternoon, concentrated in the east. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see thicker cloud and more general rain moving in. That rain will spread to most places overnight, heaviest on western hills, but northern Scotland and southeast England should stay dry. It will turn chilly in the far north. And on to tomorrow, it will bring further outbreaks of rain, heavy and prolonged in places, but northern Scotland will stay largely fine. It'll be cool again, but the humidity will increase with strong winds in the south, bringing coastal gales.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up next, breakfast with Anna Jones, including the latest reaction and analysis of the triple by-election results. Anna's guests include the Conservative Party chair and the deputy leaders of Labour and the Liberal Democrats.